Welcome to True Crime Cases. Today, we are unveiling a shocking story of jealousy and an envious sheriff's wife resorts to violence by viciously assaulting a teenager to death after learning she was expecting her husband's child. Come along as we explore the horrific facts of this terrible case and examine the lethal effects of anger and betrayal. Alice was an 18-year-old recent high school graduate with big dreams and a kind heart. She was well known in her little community in North Carolina for her vivacious personality. Good-natured Alice had been attempting to save money by filling shelves at the neighborhood Dollar Tree over the summer. She intended to enroll in nursing school for a move through rallies with the hopes of working in the medical field. Change people's lives, motivated by her mother's cancer death, her aspirations, and, despite her young, Alice was mature beyond her years, and everyone who knew her appreciated her ambition. Frequently assumed the position of caregiver for her younger siblings, Aliyah and Noah, whom she guarded. He was frequently the one to assist them with their homework or take them to the nearby Dairy Queen for a treat. When Alice met reputable law enforcement officer Charles, her life took an unexpected turn. Officer and Rayford, they first met at a neighborhood gathering where Charles was well known. Because of his charm and amiable disposition, struck up a discussion with Alice about what sparked his. Conversations swiftly changed, and Charles, who is 45 years old and married, had a knack of making Alice feel valued and acknowledged. For a young lady who felt constrained by small-town life, C's attention was unique. Thrilling and unique, and their love developed in secret with kisses taken and sex that was hidden for. Alice yearned for a new world, but these times with Charles seemed like windows into it. She was also afraid since she knew the affair was dangerous, but the excitement of it all and the sheriff's attention compelled. Alice found out she was pregnant in early July of 2017, and the news shocked her. She told only her closest friends about her secret, which caused equal parts excitement and dread. Expressing to them her uncertainty about what to do, but believing Charles ought to be aware of Alice's conflict and worry about the response of Charles, his family, and the scandal that would break out in a community where everyone was aware each other, but she was also beginning to believe that this child may be the key to her future. In the days leading up to her passing, Alice told friends that Charles would be willing to participate. She hoped that Charles would support her when she confronted him with the pregnancy. Thought they would go on together in some way, but she was anxious since she felt that her life may significantly alter based on how he responded to Alice at this time of intense uncertainty. Characterized by both profound dread and bright hopes, the young lady who had previously only dreamed of rallies and a nursing profession now saw her life take an unexpected turn that would regrettably culminate in her passing on July 17, 2017, at about 7:30 a.m. Aliyah, Alice's sister, who is 15 years old, found. Alice's remains were found in the woods behind their Rafford home, which was a little cottage perched on the brink of it. As a youngster, Alice and her siblings used to frequently play in the forested area. That morning, Aliyah had gone outside to find Alice, who hadn't returned home the night before. Initially, she becomes more curious and afraid as Aliyah sees broken branches and disturbed ground heading into the trees. As she proceeded farther into the forest, she discovered her sister dead and battered on the ground. Aliyah paused in amazement as she saw Alice nude and covered with wounds and bruises. The horrific scene before she could really comprehend what had transpired, following a few minutes of silence. Incredulous, she hurried back to the home and contacted 911, her voice trembling as she did so. She was hardly able to describe what she had witnessed to the dispatcher when police came. Aliyah was covered with a blanket and sat on the stairway steps, looking pale and terrified. When a neighbor arrived after hearing the disturbance, the scenario swiftly descended into chaos. First responders hurried to seal the scene as shocked neighbors and other family members began gathering and whispering about the sad news, with others saying they had only seen Alice a day earlier. Alice's body was formally recognized on the scene 2 minutes before she grinned and laughed, and her passing sent. As her corpse was removed for an autopsy, Aliyah and her family experienced a surge of sadness and horror in Rafford. Were shocked and found it difficult to understand the savagery of what had just transpired with their Alice's terrible demise and that of her sister quickly became the talk of the town, particularly when word got out that several well-known individuals would be involved in the inquiry. Local news. As the community grieved the death of the young, media sources such as the Phil Observer reported on the incident. Police swiftly arrived on the scene shortly after 8 o'clock, accompanied by a woman with a promising future. July 17, 2017. Off policemen from the Rafford Police Department, under the direction of seasoned investigator Detective Laura Adams, renowned for her cool-headed, methodical approach, guarded the scene when Alice's corpse was discovered. Alice's body lay in a tiny space in the trees behind her, which was really unnerving. Family home covered in scratches, bruises, and evidence of a severe assault in which she had been deprived of her clothes with leaves and dirt all over her, suggesting that there had been a fight, and blood was splashed on neighboring rocks and tree roots, creating a vivid image of the brutality she had experienced. Signs pointing to a bigger tale were discovered by the detectives when they cleared the site. A burned spoon and a discarded siren were nestled among some pebbles close by. Ivan's Detective Adams. Despite Alice's lack of drug usage history, the material presented was identified as drug paraphernalia. Inquiries regarding who else could have been present that evening, or what she might have been involved in. Upon examining Alice's corpse on the spot, the medical examiner discovered a little growth. This prompted a brief examination of her abdomen, and initial results showed she was in the discovery, made in the early stages of pregnancy, startled the researchers and offered a surprising dimension. Alice's recent behavioral changes had already been the subject of gossip before to the case, and now, police were astonished when the paternity test results were revealed, and they had to think about whether her pregnancy may be a reason. Tests eventually revealed that the father, along with her small son, was Charles Detective Adams. Partner Officer Mark Jensen, who is noted for his unusual sexual habits and keen intuition. Given the delicate facts of this case, every piece of evidence would require cautious management. Detective Adams was concerned about the potential revelations of this crime as they investigated the site. Nearby metropolis, such as Rafford, particularly in light of Alice's covert pregnancy with the town sheriff currently in addition to gathering the drug paraphernalia as evidence, the police also gathered blood samples. Resolved to follow up on every clue while the community carefully monitors the investigators, police focused on the following during their investigation, since they understood they needed answers quickly. Charles is a well-known Rafford resident who has a history of being a leader in. Sheriff Charles, 45, has served the town for over 10 years and was well liked by. Known for his laid-back demeanor and sharp sense of humor, he was asked about Alice. Charles had symptoms of uneasiness, displaying a more nuanced side of himself under. Sheriff Charles sheepishly acknowledged having a sexual connection with Alice after being questioned. He claims that they first met some months prior when he stopped by on one of his patrol rounds. He first admitted to the police that he had been seduced by Alice's attractive appearance at the Dollar Tree where she worked. Physique after providing her with little favors like transportation or professional guidance, but Charles acknowledged during the interrogation that their friendship had become passionate and then physical, characterizing it as a regrettable error in judgment. Charles acknowledged that Alice had revealed her pregnancy to him just days before she passed away, and he said the news had caught him off guard, and despite his lack of enthusiasm for the pregnancy, he informed the police that he was ready to provide for her financially. But when investigators looked further, they found worrisome details of Charles's history that revealed a trend in the analysis of Charles's police records. Discovered that he had used police monies to make a number of covert payments to women over the years. Paid covert payments to a minimum of 5 women, all of whom he had allegedly had intercourse with and who became pregnant. As a consequence of these expenditures being classified as other expenses, showed up irregularly in police budgets and were never connected to any particular accounts or transactions. Highlighted warning signs for the detectives. who soon realized Charles had been concealing these partnerships to save his reputation. Charles' past showed a trend of luring young ladies, such as Alice, who are weak or in need of direction, and then rewarding them. His revelation startled investigators and heightened their suspicions that the affairs were being kept hidden. Charles's evasive comments may have shown his deeper involvement in Alice's killing, and indifferent response to these findings led investigator Laura Adams and her group to further up their efforts. Believing that if Alice's pregnancy had been made public, Charles could have stood to lose more, started to question if Charles's conduct extended beyond covert connections and payments. If his desire to safeguard his marriage and job were great enough, he might have severe actions. This new knowledge threw a negative light on the once respected reputation of the demonstrating that he was more than just a law enforcement official and may have been a suspect with a reason. Worth looking into more is Briella Charles, a well-known woman in Rafford and the wife of the sheriff. Social Scene was promptly summoned to interrogate a housewife who was notorious for her acerbic remarks and high criteria. Briella, 42, has been involved in her husband's life and work for a long time, but as they learned more about her past, they started to perceive a different, resentful side of Briella. In her interview, Briella didn't hold back her mistrust and resentment at the state of her marriage. She informed the police that she had been suspecting her husband of infidelity for years because of odd stains. She discovered whispers from townspeople in their bed linens, which she had decided to disregard. Briella outlined how she had frequently ignored these misgivings in favor of concentrating on, quote, my responsibilities as a Christian wife, and convincing herself that Charles loved her and their family, but in her heart, she had her misgivings, particularly after noticing a significant change in Charles's behavior during the previous 3 months. He grew suspicious about his phone and would arrive at work late without warning, while Briella wanted to question his justifications since she began to suspect that something was seriously amiss. Point came when Briella saw an unsettling film on Charles's laptop by what she described as accident. She claimed to have opened his laptop to shut it down while cleaning his home office, but instead, she discovered a sex film of Charles and a considerably younger lady among the routine files, and she immediately recognized her as. After just a few seconds of watching, Alice realized that the two were having late-night sex. Briella talked of feeling ill and heartbroken that night in the aisles of the neighborhood Dollar Tree, unable to. Briella stated that she had intended to approach Charles over the recording, but before, one of Briella's acquaintances had discovered Alice was pregnant, which was even more unexpected to her. While buying pregnancy pills at a nearby drugstore, Alice casually mentioned it to Briella. Realized right once that the pregnancy was probably Charles doing. The revelation left her feeling deceived, embarrassed, and furious in a level that she was unable to conceal. Briella claimed to have never directly addressed Alice about the pregnancy, although police subsequently discovered evidence to the contrary. Detectives discovered communications on Briella's phone that she had organized to meet Alice in the neighborhood pool a few days prior to her passing. Later, witnesses attested to seeing Briella allegedly lunged at her during the hot and furious confrontation, according to the two of them. Accused Alice of being a bleeping bleep who simply wanted to bleep while brandishing a pair of garden scissors, and insisting on knowing her plans with Charles. This forthright exchange ran counter to Briella's remarks to the police, indicating that she was prepared to take action beyond simply confronting Alice in private. When police probed Briella, she acknowledged that she had been furious and talked about feeling ashamed. She claimed that her feelings were conflicting, as if her life had fallen apart in front of her eyes. Envy, along with anger at Charles for treating her disrespectfully, and anxiety about how this will affect their family. Standing in the neighborhood, Briella Stainen depicted a woman on the verge of, had put up with years of accusations of adultery, but considered Alice's pregnancy to be intolerable, according to the police. Left the interview really questioning Briella's involvement in the case, as well as her feelings and behavior. Alice was a prime suspect in what was happening since the days before her death revealed a clear purpose. Police calmed down the situation, and it soon became one of Rayford's most frightening investigations. They discovered information about Alice's murder that changed the course of their inquiry in a new. Among the strewn about debris, they discovered drug paraphernalia, such as used sirens, a little white powder bag next to Alice's body as investigators tracked down the objects that were connected to Alice's calm and reticent 15-year-old sister Aaliyah. Because of Aaliyah's involvement with the narcotics, investigators used a different approach, taking into account the potential methods or addiction may be connected to Alice's death. They each hypothesized a number of potential outcomes. The idea that Aaliyah's drug usage had caused a conflict was just as alarming as the last one. Detectives thought about whether Aaliyah could have disliked Alice's interference between the sisters. And if this family conflict had somehow turned into a deadly fight, this notion grew in popularity as police became more aware of Aaliyah's drug-related issues, which were increasingly more serious than even close relatives were aware of. Another option that the police looked into was the potential that Aaliyah owed money to Alice, one of her drug dealers, who worked part-time at Dollar Tree. May have provided financial support to pay off Aaliyah's debts, but this would have caused tension. Because of her low resources, detectives believed that Alice's debts or dealer pressure may have resulted in Alice's demise if she had ventured into hazardous region on behalf of the police for her sister. Further conjectured that Aaliyah's addiction may have unintentionally attracted a hazardous crowd to their life. Maybe Alice's awareness of her sister's association with these people put her in danger and make her a target for those who are linked to Aaliyah's drug problems as they looked more closely at Aaliyah's recent actions and discovered texts on her phone that showed she was in communication with. The messages depicted a small number of local drug traffickers and users as a teenage girl is struggling to conceal her addiction from her family while becoming more and more dependent on it. This revelation of Aaliyah's drug use brought up serious concerns in a dangerous society regarding the underlying dynamics inside the family and how they may have contributed to Alice's demise. Police were. Currently, there are several ideas that suggest Aaliyah's drug usage may have been a catalyst for the. Investigators had to look more closely at the family after the sad events that led to her sister's murder. Connections within the family and Aaliyah's private life before making any judgments. Aaliyah eventually opened up to investigators in a tense interview room, disclosing startling information on her difficulties and relationships with Charles. Aaliyah said that she had been, since her mother passed away from cancer when she was just 15, Aaliyah has been secretly addicted to narcotics. Said that she turned to drugs to mask the excruciating anguish of her addiction because she felt lost and alone. Had rapidly deteriorated, although she was able to conceal it from the majority of her life until Aaliyah disclosed that she was caught taking narcotics by Charles when he found it earlier that year, and rather than putting her through the customary legal procedure, they even arrested her. He started pressuring her, suggesting that she might resolve the arrest by going inside. Aaliyah had felt imprisoned and was afraid of having sex with him at that time. Her addiction became public and feeling powerless to stop someone as well-respected and powerful as the sheriff. But Aaliyah informed the police that once Alice found out about her situation, she was appalled and protective of Alice, who had always adopted a maternal role following their mother died, reportedly confronted Sheriff Charles and begged him to leave Aaliyah alone. Alice even offered Sheriff Charles that she would have sex with him herself if he agreed to keep Aaliyah safe and release her. This sacrifice signaled the beginning of Alice concealed a sinister arrangement with the sheriff from everyone, even herself. Investigators were astounded by friends Aaliyah's confession, which detailed how this whole incident had caused her to feel helpless and guilty. At first, she had felt glad when Alice stepped in, wishing it would put an end to her problems, but Aaliyah eventually realized the price. With her sister's assistance, she observed Alice grow more aloof and reclusive. Aaliyah's lively personality had begun to wane and had been replaced by fear and concealment, which she was unable to overcome. Police observed Aaliyah's distress as she felt her sister was taking on her load. Spoke, describing the devastating emotional toll the circumstance had put on her as, after concluding the interview, detectives realized they needed to learn more about Sheriff Charles. Aaliyah's impassioned testimony uncovered a complicated web of relationships between the sisters and their history. Relationships tainted by fear, grief, and manipulation, underscoring the terrible results of. As investigators pieced together Alice's last days, one name kept popping up: Briella. The evidence against Charles, the sheriff's wife, indicated a terrible chain of events that resulted in. According to their results, Briella had grown more upset and envious after Alice passed away. She realized that Alice wasn't just another one of her husband's children after learning of her pregnancy. She posed a threat as a young lady bearing her husband's kid, and maybe the secret to it. On the night of the murder, Briella had a scandal that might destroy her carefully constructed world. Detectives suspect she addressed Alice after waiting until she knew she would be home alone. They would be difficult to spot in the little area of woodland next to her house. Briella first made an effort to remain composed while insisting that Alice terminate her pregnancy and go, but when Briella noticed that Alice was unfazed by her threats, a furious quarrel broke out. Something inside of her broke, and she seized a large wooden club out of a mixture of fear, rage, and betrayal. Briella barely noticed when she carried a tool into Casey and started hitting Alice in her rage. She simply continued striking all the emotions with the blood or the bruises she left on Alice's body. When she finally stopped, she saw Alice's lifeless body. She had been pent up and was now erupting into rage. Briella tried to clean herself after the murder, but the entire truth hit her. She had gone too far. Ended up concealing the club and returning home in the hopes of continuing her life as if nothing had occurred. Believed that since she was the sheriff's wife, no one would ever suspect her, but investigators discovered evidence that connected her to. After examining the club, the criminal detectives found evidence of Briella's fingerprints. Additionally, investigators found fabric fibers on Alice's body that corresponded to items Briella was known to wear. Police routinely moved to arrest Briella Charles on the morning of July 27, 2017, and detectives showed up. When someone knocked on her door early in the morning, while the sun was barely rising, she responded in calmly at first, thinking it was just another standard appointment. But once they told her about Briella's face became pale as she was accused of murder, and she attempted to deny any connection, stating that she had been at home all night, but that she lost her cool under pressure and was allowed to out in handcuffs, avoiding the stares of the neighbors who had gathered outside and staring down. The family was relieved and saddened by the news of Briella's imprisonment, but they would never retrieve Alice. But at last they had some clarifications. Briella's actions had destroyed her own life, family's reputation, and surprised the community. In May 2018, Briella Charles's trial started to draw a crowded courtroom and attention from the local media. Her defense team, headed by lawyer Wallace K., took a surprising strategy for defending a betrayed wife. Briella said that she was pushed to her breaking point by her attorneys argued about her husband's years of adultery, including his relationship with Alice. That sheriff exacerbated Briella's tremendous emotional anguish, which led to her acts. They depicted the shock of finding out about Alice's pregnancy and Charles' treachery. Briella, a lady experiencing mental distress, claims she had no intention of killing Alice, but had behaved in an unreasonable rage. The prosecution, under the direction of District Attorney Linda Chavez, vehemently disputed this claim, and Chavez provided proof of Briella's strategic behavior. Chavez said that Briella had brought the club to the altercation that evening, had planned the assault with the intention of killing Alice since she posed a danger to her marriage and her social standing. Chavez said that Briella's motivation was to defend her rather than to temporarily go insane. Reputation and shield her family from any embarrassment. Chavez contended to the jury that Alice was a victim who was innocently singled out for being involved with Charles. Throughout the trial's emotional weight was lifted, particularly when Alice's friends spoke of their loss, and the friends and neighbors also attested to Alice's kind demeanor, which contrasted with the effect of her death. Briella's face remained a mix of shame and anger due to the harsh finish she experienced throughout the trial. Despite her defiance, she periodically cried when her attorney brought attention to her husband's treachery. Briella Charles was selected by the jury following 2 weeks of deliberations and compelling closing arguments. The verdict that she was guilty of second-degree murder appeared to hit her with a chilly finality, so she kept her head up. Down as the court imposed a 25-year jail term without the chance of release as the Briella's calmness wavered as the sentence was read, and she seemed frightened, clearly taking in the truth of Alice's future family experienced a bittersweet sense of justice after Ken's punishment. However, there was a mixed response from the community. Some people felt sympathy for Briella's representation as a woman. Others saw the penalty as justice served Briella's narrative, while others were driven to the brink. Would result in behind bars, a sharp contrast to the life of social esteem she had previously had. Following, all parties engaged in the trial suffered lifelong scars, and Briella Charles was given a sentence of. She joined the Ohio Correctional Institution and was sentenced to 25 years in jail for the second-degree murder of Alice. Every day for years, she would confront the truth of her conduct in the institution for women, frequently reflect on her life prior to the murder, which was full of family get-togethers and neighborhood activities. But now, her existence was centered on counseling sessions and jail routines, which were. Charles had to deal with a different sort of reckoning as part of her rehabilitation following. When the judicial authorities looked into his misappropriation of public monies, they found that in order to conceal his extramarital affairs, he had been paying other women in secret, including Alice. Charles was charged with several offenses in May 2018, a few weeks after Briella's sentence. Citing embezzlement and official misconduct, he was convicted and given a sentence of 5 years in jail. The scandal startled many inhabitants of Winchester, a tiny town. Dissatisfied since Charles's actions destroyed their perception of him as a respected leader. Faith, given that Aaliyah's account changed after she suffered the terrible loss of. In order to address her drug misuse issues, her sister enrolled in a recovery program. Alice put a lot of effort into rebuilding with the help of therapists and a committed recovery community. By 2019, she had not only completed her rehabilitation program, but also earned a degree in. Aaliyah, who graduated from college with a social work degree, wished to assist those who encountered like difficulties, ultimately improving the lives of Briella Charles and others by utilizing her experiences to encourage and assist those in need. Alice tragically crossed paths with Briella, creating a web of heartache that led to Briella's forced imprisonment. While Charles's fall from Alice left him alone, she had to face the repercussions of her conduct. And shamed Aaliyah, however, came out as a survivor who discovered how to deal with her loss and suffering. Her experiences became a warning, and she dedicated her life to assisting others in finding their way to recovery. Story for the community that serves as a reminder of the terrible consequences of violence and treachery.